Welcome to the Prison Professors podcast. We serve people who face challenges with prosecution, sentencing, and prison. My co-founders are Sean Hopwood and Justin Paperny. My name is Michael Santos. We create digital content and our team offers individual consulting services. We also assist agencies that want to improve outcomes. To learn how we can help you, text the word Prison Pro to 44222. Again, text Prison Pro to 44222 and get our free brochure. You can also visit us at prisonprofessors.com or contact Justin at 818-424-2220. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Send confirmation that you have rated our Prison Professors podcast. Leave us a review, and we'll send you a free digital book. We'll work hard to earn 5 stars. Stay tuned for a 20 to 30-minute episode with Prison Professors. Hello, I am Michael Santos with Prison Professors, and I'm back with episode 2 with my friend Scott Tucker. Scott is an amazing guy. He just shared with us his incredible story of building a company that generated billions of dollars in revenues, billions of dollars in taxes, and yet he found himself in the crosshairs of the federal government. So, Scott, in the last episode, you told us a little bit about what the jury decided after your trial. How long did it take them to come up with that verdict?
Well, it's complicated because we were in trial for almost 6.5 weeks, and the trial ended around noon on a Thursday. And during our entire trial, the court, nobody sat on Fridays. So the jury was used to being off on Fridays. And after the case ended at noon on Thursday, everybody, including the prosecutors, assumed that what the judge would do, he would pick this back up on Monday morning and we would start with jury instructions, etc. And all of a sudden he said, no, we're going to have jury instructions tomorrow morning on Friday, and you need to be here at 8:30 in the morning, which they've never had to be there at 8:30 before. It was always 10. And so they were disgruntled about that. You could easily tell. So they came in on Friday at 8:30 and they listened to 4 hours of jury instructions. Then they were sequestered and they weren't able to go out to lunch like they usually were. And he had lunch brought in, and it was a Friday. It was just, we didn't catch a break anywhere there. And they came back with a verdict against us at right before 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon.
So the same day that the judge released the jury to consider the verdict, they came back after an 8-week trial, 6 weeks prosecution, couple of weeks with you, and it took them a couple of hours to come up with a verdict?
Yes, it was unbelievable. And
I suppose that speaks a lot for people to understand that when bringing a complicated litigation in the government, in the courtroom, sometimes juries may just have some fatigue and want to get it over with. The easiest way to get it over with is to say guilty.
I firmly believe that, as I mentioned earlier, is that when things get too complicated, it's easy for people just to take the easy way out. And this was a very, very technical and complicated case. And it was just the jury instruction alone were almost 70 pages. It took 4 hours, and they were very technical in nature. And it was even hard for me to follow them. And, I know that better than anybody.
When you talk about the complexities, you're also talking about massive amounts of money when you're saying billions of dollars, and you're asking 12 people, likely 12 people that are average income earners, probably never held $10,000 in cash in their life. If they're like many people in America, they're struggling with finances, and they hear a guy that is super wealthy. I think it's probably easier to convict and go home.
There's no doubt about that, and that we took that in consideration before we went to trial. But, we all believe that ultimately the law would prevail. And unfortunately, I think people need to take that into consideration, the reality of just human nature versus actually what the law is. And it's it can be very, very difficult to take, especially once you've built a business. But if you're super successful and there's a lot of money involved, there's a good chance you're going to turn off some of the jurors. No doubt about it.
Well, I can say that you'd said that you hoped that the law would prevail, and I think there's still some hope that the law will prevail in the Second Circuit when your case goes before the appeals court. But we know that's kind of tough, and we know that battle is yet to be fought. But right now we're talking about what happens after the jury comes back with a guilty verdict. Now, prior to the verdict, what level of supervision did the government have over you? Did they have a bail outstanding on you?
Yeah, I had when we got indicted, we were released on our own recognizance, and I had to put my one of my homes up as collateral.
So your bail, your bail was secured by a single home?
Yes, and by my jet.
And what has happened to the home and the jet as of today?
The jet is a complicated story, and the government made an order to the judge to sell it, and he agreed with it, and we couldn't fight that. So that my jet was sold. My home, it's nothing's happened to it.
You mentioned your jet. I think you've got a photograph or a model of your jet behind you. Can I see it?
Yeah.
There it is.
There? Yeah. Yeah.
That's the Scott Tucker jet. That is a Lear?
Yeah, it's a Lear 60XR.
A lot of the people that we've interviewed before in the past who've had jets said that was one of the toys they missed the most. How do you feel about it?
Well, as you can see with most companies, it's an extremely, extremely powerful business tool. And if you use it like that, it can be very beneficial for your business. And I had this for almost 15 years, and I used it a lot, and it was incredibly efficient, and it was very good for all of my businesses in so many different ways. So yeah, it's a great business tool. And, from a personal perspective, obviously it's very nice to have, but from a business perspective, if it's used correctly, it's tremendous. I'll give you an example. I never, ever sent my jet anywhere to pick somebody up, and they said they couldn't do it. So I think you can take it from there.
Scott, you'd mentioned in the previous episode that your attorneys had told you to expect a very lengthy prison term. Why do you suppose that your judge allowed you to go home after trial in light of that sentence that your attorneys are talking about?
I really don't know. I mean, we were all, I think, surprised is not the right word. I think we were more shocked because my attorneys told me that if we came back with a verdict of guilty, that they would take us immediately. So when we found out that they had come back with a verdict, I'd given my attorneys my watch and my money and my stuff because I figured, number one, they didn't come back with a verdict that quick and it was going to be in our favor. So I was expecting the worst. And did the judge show some mercy on us? I don't know. But we were lucky that he allowed us to stay out basically on house arrest until we get sentenced. So, it's hard for me to answer that.
I would take some encouragement from that, but tell us a little bit about how the level of liberty changes from when you're out on bond, on bail, versus when the judge sentences you home to home confinement.
Well, being on bail, really, we were just restricted to geographic areas. And if we traveled outside of those, we just had to get permission. And I traveled quite a bit, and we didn't have any issues with that. And the judge was very nice about that and always got back with us immediately. He ordered home confinement before we get sentenced, and that's a whole different animal. You actually have a bracelet around your foot, and if you leave the perimeter of your house, it goes off and tells them. So you're pretty much confined to your house. And as much as that sounds like, well, that wouldn't be so bad, it's more difficult than you would imagine. And so, but you got to make the best of it and deal with it.
Tell us how you've been passing through each day. You've been on home confinement since the jury rendered its verdict, which was, I think you said, in September. So you're going on now 3 or 4 months of it. What have you been doing?
Well, I try to keep a normal routine. And unfortunately, I'm able to do a lot of things, phone and internet. And, I'm very fortunate. I've got a gym in my house and I'm able to resume all of my workout activities, even though some days I don't feel like it. But kind of get in that routine, and it's difficult. There's no doubt about it. And it just takes a lot of discipline to get up and just, get on with your day and not, get dragged down in this. And again, as I mentioned earlier, working with you has been very helpful because it seems like you always pop up at the key moment when I'm the worst and, let me get on with things. So I really appreciate that.
I can tell you I have not found that to be the case, Scott. I found you to be incredibly inspiring every day, despite you're facing a struggle that would cripple and derail many people. You've faced it with courage, and I've appreciated your texts of riding your bicycle for 50, 60 miles a day and just moving through this like the stud that has moved through every other struggle in life. And I know you've gone through many, and you're going to go through this one as well.
Well, I appreciate that. This is a tall order. Yeah, I'm fortunate that I've got a bike and a trainer for my bike, and I can get on there and ride for a couple hours, 3 hours, and ride 50 or 60 miles inside my house with it. And I've been doing that way before all of this happened. So I'm fortunate that I have that outlet to be able to do, and I can do it in my home. Most people don't have that.
I think that very strong commitment to fitness is playing well in preparing your mind for the journey ahead. But that challenge that you are facing can be somewhat overwhelming to people. You said that your lawyers told you to anticipate a sentence of 185 years. I'd like you to tell us a little bit about how you learned about this. Was it an email? How did you find out?
Well, the federal sentencing guidelines is a matrix of numbers, and depending on what the crime is and how much money is involved, they just assign numbers to it. And unfortunately, in my case, they're going back for almost 20 years and looking at every dollar of revenue, and they're trying to assign that to the specific crimes in this. And so the numbers are, they're out there, in a different atmosphere. The federal sentencing guidelines, they max out at 500 million, and we're like 10 times that or more. And so my attorneys, they're not really sure because this case is so different and so complicated, and it's the first of its kind ever. There's never been a state violation of usury with a RICO charge. It's never happened before. So who the hell knows what's going to happen? They can't really. What typically a good defense attorney does is, an experienced one, I hate to say it, but they don't usually give you a lot of hope, and just because they don't want to do that. So if they're wrong, you're not, just falling to pieces. So I've had to learn that through this experience and journey, that you've got to, temper what they say and use your own judgment.
In the previous episode, I asked whether you ever considered taking a deal. And my understanding was that you always wanted to stay the course and proceed through trial. But if a guy who has lived a 100% legitimate life, building a successful business, found himself being effectively crippled, not being able to hire counsel of choice, having his assets frozen, having to go through trial with a jury that may not be able to identify with the level of wealth that the prosecutors are presenting. You've experienced a lot. What level of advice might you offer to somebody else who's a white-collar business executive
who's facing a challenge with the Department of Justice. Do you have any advice for somebody like that who might, when it comes to considering taking a deal or going to trial?
Well, I think that in a lot of circumstances, they are probably smarter to do that depending on, what the prosecution has. This is a unique case in that they were trying to basically cripple an industry and a business model versus, a specific, crime, if you will. I think a lot of people have to consider their family, what it's going to do to their family. I think that's a big consideration. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of guys out there that get put in a situation, in a position where they just feel it's just better to take a deal, and they agree and admit to things that probably aren't 100% accurate. But they do it because they don't have the funds to fight it. They don't have the intestinal fortitude to fight it. And ultimately they're looking at, what's the best for my family. So, that's, I think that's a big factor. It's what's best for my family. And, so it's a difficult environment. I mean, if you've done something and you are guilty, that's to me, that's pretty easy. I mean, you just, you take your medicine and make the best deal you can. But, if you're in a gray area or something that, it's not that concrete. Like in my situation, it's very, I wouldn't wish it on anybody.
You mentioned in the previous question, you mentioned the federal sentencing guidelines. What is your understanding of the level of discretion that the judge has with those sentencing guidelines?
Well, my understanding, he's got a lot of discretion, but it's his discretion, and there's not a magic formula to that. Every case is different. I didn't testify at trial, so he doesn't know a lot about me except what was exposed by the prosecutors, and so we're hoping to show him a different side of me in some of the letters and documents that are going to be sent to him. But he has a lot of discretion. I mean, this isn't a drug case or anything where there's a mandatory minimum, anything like that. So, but it's hard to say. I mean, that's what even makes it more difficult, because you just don't really have any idea. But when you have your attorneys that are basically telling you that you better get ready for impact. I mean, it's like being in a jet and you're going down, and it's, are you going to make it, or, what's going to happen? So that's kind of how I feel.
Yeah, I went through trial, and I can tell you that my attorneys were telling me to expect a life sentence when I was convicted. And when my judge sentenced me to 45 years, I really wasn't able to just differentiate 45 years between a life sentence. It wasn't until I got in there that I really started to develop a mindset and some strength that says, I can get through this. And I don't have any doubt that regardless of what the judge imposes in your case, you will pull up that same level of fortitude and find out a way to get through it successfully. And that's what I'm hoping for.
Well, I don't know, but your story's incredible, and you're definitely an inspiration. But unfortunately, you were a lot younger than I was.
I was a lot younger than you were, and a lot younger. Yeah, so it was a little bit different for me. But you'd mentioned also that you didn't take the stand at trial. I did take the stand at trial, which probably was one of the worst decisions that I made, because unlike you, I was guilty of the charges that the government brought against me, and yet I still perjured myself on the stand. In light of you not taking the stand at trial, tell me how many interactions, one-on-one interactions, if any, you have had with the judge who has your future in his hands.
Well, that's what I was saying. It's very, very little. I mean, he's only heard me speak a couple times because I didn't speak at trial, and that was all that was all a defense, strategy from the very beginning. And I'd agreed with my attorneys on that, and it allowed them to prepare for the case in a whole different way versus somebody testifying. But yeah, the judge really he has not heard me talk. So, I'm just trying to, put my best foot forward. But again, some of the things that we've discussed is that when you're going to appeal this, and what your demeanor is with the judge and all that becomes a whole different dynamic, as we discussed, and that's for a whole nother discussion.
So what do you think your judge knows about you as a person, as an individual, aside from the criminal conviction? What does he know about Scott Tucker?
Well, I think up to this point he doesn't know much, and so my best shot is try to educate him with in written form, my life story, as well being documented and backed up by the letters from my friends and family.
How much time have your attorneys spent, in your estimation, in helping the judge understand who you are as an individual?
Well, I would say
at this point,
I wouldn't say they spent much time on that, because it's all based on what we're going to send them from my side. They're going to help critique all of that, and they're going to do everything that they can. But a lot of that comes from, it's got to come from me. So
my understanding right now is that your judge doesn't know anything about you as an individual. Your lawyers, up until this point, have not taken an opportunity to help the judge know you very well as an individual. How about, what do you know about your federal judge?
Well, obviously anybody that's going to get sentenced, before we went to trial, I mean, it's normal that, you try to, find out who he is in all of his different things, what kind of cases he's been involved with. And, you do your best with that. And also see how he acts and interacts with, the jury and your attorneys and the prosecutors during the trial. We were in trial for, almost, 6.5 weeks. I mean, we all knew each other after. I mean, I could hear them talk, but I didn't talk.
Mm-hmm. You'd mentioned that the government or you're anticipating that the government will come back with a $6 billion loss. I don't know how they came at that. I think that you said it was just your total revenues that you did. Is that right?
Right.
So what are your attorneys doing and I know that you're contesting your guilt altogether, but for sentencing purposes, what theory is your team trying to put forward with regard to the amount of loss?
Well, the numbers are so astronomical that it's really hard to put a real strategy or plan together. A lot of the data that we would have used with our forensic accountant was not allowed at trial. So trying to introduce some of that in now is pretty difficult, and it's a gargantuan task. And unfortunately, all the forensic accounting stuff that I need it all has to be paid by the court, and you got to go to the judge and get all that money approved. And in this short amount of time, it's really a difficult task. And my attorneys are doing the best they can, but they've even admitted this was by far the most complicated case they had ever been in. And my lead attorney, he'd been practicing for 40 years. I mean, he's a good trial attorney, but he said he's never seen anything like that. So for them to prepare some strategy to reduce that, it's going to be very difficult to even get down to the half a billion number. And the only where you would get any relief is that if you could get to the $500 million number and go down from there. And
besides the amount of loss, that one of the things about the guidelines, the sentencing guidelines, is the judge is supposed to take other factors into consideration besides the amount of loss, particularly when the guidelines are over-representative of the crime. What understanding do you have about the other factors that the judge will take into consideration at sentencing?
Yeah, there's several. But unfortunately, in this case, we could kind of understand and see kind of where the judge, what his thoughts on the case were and what his position on the industry was and some other things. So I don't know how effective or favorable that's going to be for us.
How do you anticipate that the judge will take your character? I mean, my understanding is that there were no allegations of you hiding cash or holding money in offshore accounts. That you were 100% legitimate with regard to paying your taxes and employing people, and just living as a CEO who built a great company. What is your understanding of the judge? How will the judge learn about your character as a human being separate from this?
Well, that's what I was saying before. The only way that we could effectively communicate that is through the letters from my friends and family and my business associates, as well as basically writing out my side of the story in my life to the judge in a concise form that he can understand that and go with it. And
that's where I was getting at. It's your biography, you writing your story. What did you reveal in that story? How much did you focus on your business, or on where did you start in revealing that story?
Well, that was a big task, considering everything that's happened. And I just went back and kind of started at the beginning, how I was raised and the different things that happened to me over the period of my life, and just telling the truth.
With regard to other people writing character reference letters, in what ways are you instructing them to prepare a letter that the judge can take into consideration prior to sentencing?
Well, that's a great question. I have not really instructed them at all on, it's like you write what you feel and what you want. And it's pretty amazing. Most of them have come back with the truth. And, I guess what you would want and what you would expect without you having to coach them. And so I've been really fortunate with that.
And in what ways is your family preparing for this sentencing hearing?
Man, that's a tough one. This whole ordeal has lasted so long. It's wretched. They've been put through the ringer. I think that ultimately bringing some closure to it is going to be good for them. But it's terrible. What they're doing to prepare for it. They're just living one day at a time, because you really can't plan for much until you kind of know what the scenario and what the setting is.
So in what ways can the people who love you and the people that you love, in what ways can they support you through this very difficult time going forward?
That's a great question. And when I talk to them, most people don't even know what to say to me. And they want to be supportive, but most of them say they couldn't even imagine what I'm dealing with or what I'm thinking or what I'm going through. So it's really hard for them to be supportive, except to just, I guess, just being normal, just, coming over and saying hi and bringing you some food or doing this. But nobody can sit there and get real deep and real critical with you, because they have no idea what they're talking about, and they all kind of accept that. So for them, I guess just being supportive is just being around. But that's maybe different for different people. But it's a very, very tough question. for people.
I'm going to tell you that our team here at Prison Professors, Sean, Justin, and I, we want to do our part to support you, Scott. And one of the ways that I can personally do that is by making sure that your story lives on. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to continue interviewing Scott. This is kind of the conclusion of the criminal justice part, where we've heard about what brought him into the system. And here we've heard about how he is preparing for sentencing, which is bracing himself for impact. But in the future episodes, what I would like to be talking with Scott about is how did he build a phenomenal business that employed so many people? What did he do with the extraordinary wealth that he created through his businesses? What were his passions? And who really is Scott Tucker? Because if the government swallows him up and puts him inside of a prison cell, I would like to have more people understand really who the real Scott Tucker is. And that's one of the ways that we can learn more about our criminal justice system and why we're in need of reform. We're in need of reforms that will reserve prison space for the people who truly threaten society, and not for the people that perhaps, if the government is upset with, should better be responded in with civil matters rather than criminal.
Very good.
So yeah, we will be telling your story on the Prison Professors podcast. It'll live in perpetuity. And I hope that listeners will reach out to Scott. It'll be when I get an update on his sentencing status, we will be publishing that here. So if somebody wants to write him directly, we would encourage them to do that. For now, I am Michael with prisonprofessors.com, and I want to thank you, Scott, again for giving us your time during this very difficult transition as you brace for impact.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be back soon with another episode of Scott Tucker. I'm Michael with prisonprofessors.com. Thank you. My partners, Sean Hopwood and Justin Paperny, along with myself, really appreciate you listening to the Prison Professors podcast. We would appreciate it also if you will do us the solid of subscribing to our show on iTunes, visiting us on YouTube and subscribing to our YouTube channel, and liking us on Facebook. We strive to give away content that will help people who want to learn more about the criminal justice system and what they can do to prepare for the best possible experience through it. If you'd like to learn how we can help you, please text the word Prison Pro to 44222. That's text Prison Pro to 44222, and you will receive a free brochure. Also, if you rate and review our show after you subscribe on iTunes, we'll be happy to send you a free digital book. Thanks so much. Back with another inspiring episode soon on the Prison Professors podcast.